Welcome back to The Intersect. We are coming at you this summer with a special off-season episode with a really special and really exciting announcement. Our very own Mary Bruno is publishing a book, which is freaking amazing.
I'm so
excited.
It's
awesome. And so we're going to talk about it because this is our podcast and we talk about whatever we want. And we're going to yuck it up about this amazing book that the amazing Mary wrote. And yeah, so there we go. There's your intro.
Perfect.
I know. Yeah, so we're going to get into, this is going to be like the behind the scenes, right? So you can read the book summary, great. You can read, whatever. You can read endorsements, but no, this is going to be the author's words, talking about the process, talking about, all of those nitty gritty fun details that we love getting that whenever we watch movies, right?
Right.
Get the behind the scenes stuff. And it's so cool because it gives you all that extra info.
Yeah, it's the stuff you don't get in the book. Yeah.
Right. So first question over to you, Mary. What made you want to write this book?
That's such an interesting question because I did not plan on writing this book. But first, let me show it to you.
I know it's
for
so
all
pretty.
those out on YouTube land. If you're watching this on the video, I'm showing you a copy of the book. So it looks really pretty, actually. So I hope you get a chance to see it.
We might have to change our podcast graphics to include a cover of the book so that people who are listening
can see the cover. Yeah, because you really do judge a book by its cover. I mean, everybody says don't judge a book by its cover, but I knew that was something really important I had to get right. But before we get to that, yeah, I did not actually plan on writing this book. What happened was I had my worst fears finally come true. Like for years, I had feared that I would need a medical hysterectomy because the pain, the physical pain from endometriosis and adenomyosis and scar tissue, it was so bad for so long. I mean, since I was like 14-ish, it got, I had really bad cramps and it just got worse throughout the years. By the time I was in my late 20s, it had gotten so bad. I bookmarked this because this is how I describe it in the book. I said that it isn't discomfort that just comes every once in a while. It's a freight train running at full speed and plowing into my body 12 times a year, whether I'm ready for it or not. Just to kind of give you an idea. And at the end, it was a physical pain that would come, it would be more than when I was just on my period. So, but the reason I'm describing this is because as bad as the physical pain was and had become, the emotional pain of infertility was worse. It was so much worse. And that's why
that's a huge point. Cause I don't know that I think we're sorry to interrupt, but I think we're starting to understand this stuff more, but I don't think that by and large we understand or even acknowledge, I don't think we have the language to really understand just how damaging emotional pain is. And I know that this is you would think, well, obviously the physical pain is worse. And it's no.
You can see physical pain. You can see someone in physical pain.
Right. But you can't, unless you have eyes trained to see, you can't really see somebody, not even yourself, in emotional pain. Because there's not a tangible fix for it. I think that might be part of it. With physical pain, even if the process takes a while, there are those tangible things that you can do. And I know that you do talk about this in your book for yourself, that there were things that you were trying to do to mitigate that physical pain, but there was this huge just gap about the emotional component
that no one prepares you for. Because we really don't know how to handle this, right? There's all this, and we have the psychological help, of course, but with the physical medicine, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. So there's these treatment protocols you can go through, but nobody wants to expect that they're going to experience such deep emotional pain. Like, you really don't prepare for it until you're in it, and you have to find a way to heal and to survive, really. So, and I never had language also for it until recently, until you and I became really good friends, actually, to refer to it as a trauma, that it was both emotionally traumatic and physically traumatic, with the extent of pain in both areas I was experiencing. So that language helped too, but I didn't have it until so many years passed. But like I was saying, I was much more, go ahead.
When you described, when you read that portion of your book, the word that came to mind, when you said you're going to get hit, you're going to get hit 12 times a year with that pain. The word that came to my mind was torture.
Absolutely.
Like that, like, because there's a psychological element to torture that it's coming, and you don't know when it's going to end. And it's your own body doing this to you.
Yes. Right.
And it's like, yeah. And I think, that's something that you discovered. And I know we've seen it in a couple of different places, like when talking about endometriosis as a trauma, like this, your brain and your body are processing this disease as traumatic. And that, as you and I both know, that there is an extreme importance about putting the right terminology, because then you can address the problem appropriately. Right. If you don't have the right terminology, you're just kind of clawing in the dark a little bit, doing what you can, but giving it that word, it's not too much, it's not too much. And I know that you get into this as well, is just how dramatically minimized pain is for women, especially around periods. And that's one of the things that you get into as well. And so maybe some women listening to this are like, well, no, it's not traumatic. And part of me is like, wants to push back and be like, is that because you've been told that your pain isn't really that big of a deal?
I think that's a big part of it for a long time. And my pain wasn't always that bad. It got bad over the course of 10, 20 years. But that's part of the reason it gets so bad, I think, because we accept, oh, pain with my period is normal. Oh, it's getting worse. Okay, well, she's just a girl. She's on her period. Just deal with it, And then it continues to grow and develop. And then we end up with something bigger, but we're just so used to it. And like you were talking about, psychologically, this is something my own body is doing to me. I used to describe it as my body is kind of attacking itself. It's like, you can't escape that. I mean, there are obviously a range of amounts of physical pain that women experience with this disease. Not every woman experiences it this severely, but this was my personal experience. And I would have chosen to, I did. This is why it took me so long to actually have a medical hysterectomy, is because I chose to deal with this rather than remove the possibility of having a child. As long as I have a uterus, I have a chance. I have a chance. Maybe that chance is small and it's getting smaller and smaller, but you don't have a uterus, you don't have a chance. So with the severity of the disease that I had, the word had been thrown out at different points of treatment by my doctors. And and endometriosis is a progressive disease if it, so I knew, like, this is likely where this is heading, but like, could I just have one pregnancy? Could I just have one child? If I could have more, that's great. But like, I would be grateful for a single pregnancy, so as time passed, and the worst of infertility for me, I would say, was about the 2-3 year mark. And then that's when I really felt hopeless and hit rock bottom. And I had this one experience, which I actually open up the book with in chapter 1. It's called Worst Day Ever. And then it was really, that was a huge turning point, my worst day ever. And then it took several years for me to really discover what God was actually calling me to do with my life. Well, actually, after I got really angry at him, of course, we cannot skip over that part.
Yes, that is a very important step.
Acknowledging reality. is a
Yeah.
very important step. And I am angry that this is what's happening with my life. I am angry that I have been a good person. I have been a faithful person. And this is what you're asking me to do with my life, God. Seriously? Like, I'm not okay with it. And it's not until I was able to get real with that I was able to move forward. And to continue to be real with that. And so then it was over the next few years, still a lot of just very difficult times. But what I'm trying to explain is the reason I wrote this book was as my 12th surgery was approaching, which was actually going to be a hysterectomy. I had at this point, again, it took a really hard, long way to get here, but I had accepted it. I had found a place of true acceptance and peace that didn't really make any sense to me as I like logically thought about it.
And it's funny you say that because I remember it was shortly after, it really wasn't that long after I met you.
Yeah, that's true.
And we had only known each other on Marco Polo. Okay. So there's not
That's
like
right.
this in real life relationship. There is a digital relationship, which Marco Polo is nice because, you know, you have the videos, you can see facial expressions and tone and all that good stuff. So it was a little bit more than just like texting or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just remember being, frankly, I don't think I've ever told you this, so
No.
weirded out by how at peace you were. I was just like,
that is so funny. You've never told me that.
No, and I just remember like, is she just like trying to spiritually whitewash this? Like, that was literally my thought. But, you know, after, you know, knowing you longer and realizing what you had been through, that there was this preparatory process in a way that like, this was your 12th surgery. This was something that had been dropped over time. So you were aware of the possibility, even while you were still holding on to that hope. And that the thing that just was like, yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, how are you not freaking out? Like, it was mind blowing to me. And again, you know, realizing that it wasn't just like this, oh yeah, no, it wasn't a shallow acceptance.
Right. Exactly.
You know, which is what I was worried about. I was like, oh gosh, if this is a shallow acceptance, this is going to come back to bite her.
It's a hard fall.
Yeah. And I was like, ooh, I was like, but I, you know, I didn't know you super well at that point. And so I was like, I'm just like sitting here like, all right, I'm just gonna watch and hope for the best.
No, and it's true. This was a legitimate, like through and through acceptance. And you'll read it in the book that I actually thought I was going to have a hysterectomy like a couple years prior. So that really helped. Like I had a lot of prep time, and from all the things that I've learned, I knew what I needed to do at this point. But the rest was grace. The rest was all God. Like just like it was truly just a permission on my end, which took a lot of dying to myself and my desires, which is no easy task. And it was not easy, and it took years. And it doesn't mean there wasn't still grief and sadness. So I want to make that clear too. It was just acceptance.
Yeah.
And also
I want to just point that out. What you just said is that even in the midst of acceptance, there can still be grief, that there is that both and, that acceptance is not the negation of sadness. It's not the negation of anger or grief. That there can be a cyclical quality to that process of mourning your loss. And that you can accept it. And yet, you know, years down the road, you can be like, why the hell did I go through that? Sorry, I dropped the H-bomb on here, but whatever.
We're real, right?
Mark this one explicit anyway. I don't know the rules, but no, it just wanted to point that out, that most people think that it's either or, that you know, okay, so I went through this process of grieving and then I arrived at the place of acceptance, boom, done, okay, over with and done. And then that, you know, those emotions can come back. And if you don't recognize that there is this tension, there is this cyclical quality, there is this mixture of things that you'll always hold together. And that's normal.
It's referencing it. It's holding a place to honor the great thing that I have lost, because it is something great that I've lost. But
Yeah.
it's also seeing and recognizing that God has not forgotten me. He has not abandoned me. He treasures me just like he does every single other woman. I think that we're scared to feel our pain deeply because we think that if we move forward, or we're scared because moving forward, like, that it says that it negates it. I don't know if anything I said just made sense, but I'm thinking
No,
like
it does. Yeah.
feeling it and graduating kind of to this place of peace doesn't mean that the bad thing, like we can still hold place for it. That's what I'm trying to say, is that it doesn't mean, if you're going to experience joy again, that's what I'm trying to say, like, to find that peace, you can still hold a place for this tragedy, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I just think about, like the crucifixion, right? Like, what a horrible thing. Like, we call it Good Friday, but it was bad. Okay. God died. This wasn't a good thing. Okay. And it was gruesome and it was bloody and it was horrible. And yes, it led to the resurrection, but you don't get the resurrection without the crucifixion. And like, we do hold space for it every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, our whole church is like, all right, we shutting things down, man. Like, Jesus is dead, right? But we hold space for that grief still 2000 years later.
Yes.
And yet we have such a hard time doing that in our own personal lives.
We do.
Like, and that it's okay. I know you just came up on the anniversary of your hysterectomy, and it was like there was like, okay, like, I'm gonna hold space for that today. um we celebrated my son's birthday recently, and like, his birth was traumatic, and it was like, I'm so happy, like, I love him so much and I'm so happy he's here, but it was like, there was some moments that day where it was like, I remembered the birth and I was like, this is hard, and it was just, like, oh, there it is, there's that memory, and it's, yeah, and it's okay.
You got to acknowledge both. You can't just pretend one isn't there. They're both there. Exactly. So that's how we move forward, by acknowledging both. And it's funny how you were like worried about what was going to happen to me. Like, when the other shoe dropped, you're like, is she really this accepting? And I write about that in the book. It's one of my favorite parts of the book, because I thought that too. I feared that too. I was like, this is too good to be true. Once we leave for Houston, I'm going to lose it. Like, right. Because it's going to become real, but I didn't. Like, I walked, this is how I really just like the way that I wrote it out. I was like, I walked to the car just fine. And then I was like, okay, once I get to the hotel and we're leaving, I'm going to but no, I walked to the hotel just fine. And then I'm like, surely when they're wheeling me out of my, my pre-op room, I'm going to like be holding the door with my hands. You cannot pull me out. But they wheeled me to the room just fine. And it was just like all these different times I was expecting, okay, but no, it was real. Like, his peace was real. This acceptance was real because of the hard work and the permission I gave God to help get me there.
Yes.
So
your consent.
Yes.
You consented. That's huge.
It was.
Yeah.
And that's the point of this book, is that, I write from the perspective of an infertile woman about just these great sufferings and tragedies that I experienced. But the real message of the book is hope. It's that, I've been to hell and back, and I'm here to tell you that there is hope, no matter what your experience is. So to finally answer your question, I did not sit down to plan to write a book. What happened was my hysterectomy was scheduled and I got sick. I got sick, and it was like a weird sickness. It was like 7 days of sickness right before COVID happened. So I actually thought it might have been COVID until I actually got COVID. I was like, no, that wasn't COVID. But I was in bed for 7 days. I felt like okay in bed, but when I got out of bed, I felt awful. So I felt okay enough to like do some writing. And what I had originally planned, I was like, well, I have this unexplained piece. It is explained, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
it still felt bizarre.
Right, exactly. And I want to describe how I got here, considering like how emotionally painful infertility has been and how I felt it at its worst.
Mhm.
And where I am now approaching permanent infertility, I want to share this story because I know how it feels to feel isolated. I know how it feels to be the only one experiencing this. And nobody was talking about it when I was at least that I knew of when I was at my worst. And I wanted women to know that there is hope again. Well, that was before I got to the book part, but I'm a blogger. I just assume like I'll write my first blog series to describe kind of how I got to this point. And it was in that week that I wrote what ended up becoming 3 different chapters in the book. But I just started on blogs that week. And then it was just actually talking to a friend, Jen Lorette, which is a mutual friend of ours, actually.
Mhm.
Jen is who from Surprised by Marriage.
She's the one who connected us.
She connected us. So yeah, how ironic. But she was just, I had put myself in this box. I just really didn't have enough confidence in myself to think I could ever write a book. It was just, I just can't do that, and she challenged me. She was like, write a book.
Who said?
Right.
Yeah.
And I just needed that, and it was just so funny how I just kind of crawled out of that box. I was just like, can I really do this? I don't know.
It's funny because, I've had the same thought. Like I've had people like, tell me you should write a book. And I'm like, they know what, like writing a book, like, are you kidding me? And it's like, honestly, when you're a writer, you write. Like that's how you practice. And when it's a book that like you want to write, it pours out of you. And
That's
you're
so
just
true.
like, well, there's a book.
Exactly. Yes, that is exactly what happened. It's so funny. Yep. And yeah, you know that better than anyone, I think. And when I started, actually, she suggested a journal at first. And I was like, but it just, that's not what wanted to write itself. A journal isn't what wanted to write itself. It was this story.
Yeah.
And Emily, when I tell you it wrote itself, I mean, I do not like to plan. I am not very organized. There was no way I was going to map out like, these are the different chapters of the book. I just started writing and the chapters were there in my head already. Mm-hmm. They were there. There took no effort, so it was just really beautiful how it unfolded. And the writing process itself, which went from about February 2020, right before COVID blew up, to about September-ish of that same year, if I had to guess, where just about the whole thing was written. And
in 7 months.
I guess so. I don't even, I was just like, okay, this is happening.
Writers everywhere are like, okay, I need you to write. Like, how did you like give me your pro tips on?
Is that a short amount of time? See, I have zero concept of what it takes to write a book. Like I have zero.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like the record to reflect that my partner in crime decided a month before the recording of this podcast that she was going to publish her book. And in 1 month, went from manuscript to published book. That's insane. Like, that's insane.
That's true.
Okay. Like, because, it doesn't happen that fast. It doesn't happen that fast. And you're over, we're having all these conversations. You're over here so worried, like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough? Is it going to happen fast enough? I'm like, girl, you're doing this in a flipping month. Like, this is wild. This is wild what you're accomplishing. So you wrote a book in 7 months. You camped on it for a while. And then you were like, I remember getting to Marco and you were like, okay, I'm going to have this available for summer reading. So here's my publish date. And I was like, that's a month from now. Holy geez. Yeah. All right. This is how this is going down.
Yeah, I like to say it's God's timing because like I just have no idea. The reason I camped on it for so long was because I had to figure out who the right publisher was, and I wanted to do it. Wait, what'd you say?
Which is a story unto itself.
Oh, it is, absolutely is. But that was a journey. But I wanted to get it right. It needed to be right. Yep. It needed to be told the right way, the way that I wanted to tell it. And that's important. So it took a couple years from start to where it's in my hand now. But that's just how it needed to be.
Yeah. Especially because, I remember you telling me, you were like, Emily, I want to write a book for the woman who will, like, every story that is out there that's accessible about women with infertility, eventually they have a child.
That is,
That's
yes,
every
generally
story.
what happens.
That's every story. So that is the story of hope.
Yes.
Eventually you will have a child. Right. And it's like, and
Which,
you wanted to write the book for the woman who that isn't what hope means. That
because
there
even
is
if you,
still,
I'm
no,
sorry, I interrupted you. I
no,
got so
you're good.
excited with where you were going.
I know. We feed off each other or whatever. It's all good. But no, but that's that even though that hope, that desire is not fulfilled, that there is still hope. And as you were talking, sharing your story, like this is just, you're talking about like you're longing to want to be a mom and have your own biological child. And it is so much of your story is just baked in with this Catholics define motherhood in biological terms. We really do. And that's it. And it's like, actually, if you dig into our faith, we don't just define it in biological terms. And that, part of your struggle and part of the emotional pain and wounding was that you were not allowed to explore, well, in this season of infertility, how is God calling me to be a mother? You were not given the tools and the language to do that. It was just, I will not be a mother until I have a child.
Exactly.
And that closed the door to this whole world of fruitfulness.
And prolong my suffering
Yeah,
unnecessarily.
that you are now stepping into, but that, it could have been so much easier. And that's what you're providing women with this book, is that those lessons that are very hard won. I saw this thing of, people who are, we call resilient or, strong. It's like there was this post that the text said, I want to sit down with those people and be like, I want to know the story of everything it took to know what you know.
Yes.
Because you went through some stuff to be able to discover this. And that's the thing that is just so, that shouldn't be, and I remember sharing with you, I think I shared it with you, the scripture passage, which is the quote that I use as the intro for my foreword.
Yes.
From Isaiah 54.
You are the one who told me about Isaiah 54.
Which is funny because if you get to verse 10 or 11, that was the verses of Isaiah 54 that I became introduced to, which didn't talk, and I didn't go to the first, but that chapter in Isaiah 54 starts with raise a glad cry, you barren one, talking to an infertile woman. And he goes on to say that you are going to have more children than the woman who has a husband, and that's in scripture. Like, are you kidding me? Like uplifting, and the fact that we don't have that language, we've lost that language, that understanding, but it's there. It's not like it exists. It's not like it's being made up. No, it's there. Spiritual motherhood and all of these types of things, they're real. How can we as Catholics talk about priests and nuns as being
Right?
spiritual mothers and
The
fathers?
Blessed Mother? Our
Right.
spiritual mother?
Right.
It's so bizarre.
No, once you get married, no, that doesn't count anymore. Excuse me? Like, no, no, it still counts. It still counts.
Absolutely.
Even for me, I'm like pregnant with number 3 and I don't get a pass from being a spiritual mother, and that's what, that didn't mean to segue into this that early, and it was like, some people are like, well, who is this book for? It's for infertile women, but it's also for women who want to have a broader understanding of what motherhood is, right? You're not rewriting the book on motherhood. You're not rewriting the book on the Catholic understanding of motherhood. You're writing a book on the authentic Catholic teaching of what motherhood actually is.
Amen.
And that it's not, it absolutely, of course, no argument includes the biological sphere. No duh.
Absolutely.
But it ain't limited to that. And that's what we've done, is we've limited it. And my gosh, name me one thing about God Almighty that is limiting. He multiplies, right? He multiplies. He doesn't limit. He doesn't confine. He creates. He's a creator. And if we're going to cooperate, he gives us all, he gives us all gifts and talents, which he's given you with writing this book, telling your story, right? Like this book, this is your baby.
Absolutely. That's a labor of love. I labored to deliver this book. This is my baby. And now everyone listening, you can see exactly why I asked Emily to write the foreword, which she did beautifully. Okay. Y'all, there is no one better than her to write this forward. She just gets it. So thank you for putting such beautiful words to what you just explained there. And in the forward, y'all, I'm reading Emily's forward and I'm like, dang it. I hate when she describes what I'm trying to say better than how I can try to say it. And that's what this forward is. Okay. Like she gets it so beautifully the way that you can, like, I call her word magic. You probably heard me refer to it a few times. But it's true. It's just that, like, it in no ways like takes down biological motherhood. That's not what this is doing at all. It's just the other part of it has slipped through the cracks somehow. Mm-hmm. And I kind of describe in the book that I think that it's just with, good efforts in the pro-life movement and like this whole thing, it's just been an unintentional side effect. But it's just saying, like, hey, can we just highlight this again? Can we just like shine a light on that? Like, this is really beautiful. And actually it's just something else I kind of write in chapter 8. I really open up this concept of like or maybe it's not chapter 8, maybe it's chapter 5, but the fact that infertility exists alone tells us that God has so many other beautiful things to bring into the world besides like children. Now, children are one of many beautiful things, but infertility exists. Right. It does. It exists. Right.
1 in 8
we are of no less. I mean, what we're able to bring into the world is no less just because we're infertile. And we know that because we have a good God. Right. So, period. And it's like, okay, so I know this. How can I get there? That was this journey for me, is like, okay, God, like, what are the gifts you've given me? And there were so many that had I focused on, so much of my energy went on just producing a child. So much of my energy and focus went to that. I was missing out on so many other things. And that can be the case whether you're infertile or not. Let's just be real with it.
I was just about to say that, like, that when you reduce motherhood to purely biological, you absolutely do major harm to infertile women, but you also do harm to fertile women, right? Because it becomes the way you define yourself. And we are not defined by what we produce, whether they be human beings or otherwise. I'm not defined by my children. I love them so much. I'm so happy that I have them. I want to raise them to know, love, and serve God and all that good stuff. Yes, absolutely, 10,000%. But at some point, they're not mine, right? I drop kick their little butts out the house and like, go live your life. That's my job. As a mother, that is so I cannot define my existence by my children because they're not mine forever. And really, to a certain degree, they're not mine. Now, I know that gets like into weird stuff. I'm not saying that my children don't belong to me, right? But it's like they are my responsibility. And it's my responsibility to work myself out of a job, that there will come a day where my relationship with them changes dramatically from conscience former and educator and all that to advisor. And that's my job. My job is not to control them in, I know we're kind of getting into, I'm tangenting a little bit, but just want to highlight like this. What can happen is women who define themselves by their children, it produces very, very, very negative, like damaging emotional relationships, right? Because then when those kids are ready to cut loose and run, mom can sometimes hang on too tight. right? And that creates a whole other set of like psychological problems. So it's like, so that's why I love, and that's why, you know, if somebody's wondering, well, would I benefit from reading this book, whether you're infertile or not, I think fertile women would benefit from reading your book for two reasons. Number one, to understand what infertile women go through. And, you know, if 1 in 8 women are struggling with infertility, you know somebody, guarantee you know somebody. She may not be really willing to talk about it, or, you know, might be uncomfortable, but you know somebody. And the other thing is that by broadening your understanding of motherhood, you can absolutely transform yourself, but you can also transform the way that you talk and you think about motherhood. And that infertile friend that you have that maybe you don't know what struggle she's going to is going to hear that language. And then she's going to say, that's a person I can talk to. I can talk to her about what I'm going, she gets it. You know, and so who knows? So
that's no small thing.
It's no small thing. It's no, because that was one of the things that you struggle with the most was the isolation. And that's, you know, anybody who is suffering, that feeling of isolation is what compounds it to the nth degree. And knowing that you're not alone, and that's the whole point of your book. You're not alone. It's not just you. I see you. I understand what you're going through. Let me, and that's one of the beautiful things about sharing stories. It's not about theological platitudes. It's not about statistics. It's not about directing you to the right doctor to get the right fix. It's nope, I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to tell you my story. I'm going to be vulnerable with you so that you feel comfortable to be vulnerable and to open up and to heal. Like that's vulnerability breeds vulnerability, which breeds healing. And it's like, it creates that community. And that's the thing, you know, that you and I have found is like, we're on the opposite ends of the fertility spectrum, right? We're talking about your book about infertility and I'm 6 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay. But we found this common ground because there is a universality to suffering and the way that we experience it and the way that we process it, the lessons that we learn from it and what we need as we're going through it. That in those departments, we really ain't that different.
That's right.
Like the suffering that we go through can be wildly different, but what we need and what we learn is usually pretty similar. Like we can find so much common ground there. And then that makes suffering a point of connection instead of a point of isolation.
Yes.
And that's where it becomes healing. And that's what your book is all about.
Yes. Amen. It's so true because, and it's been that connection between the two of us. It's been your investing in me in that way that has really allowed me to invest in you. And that's why like your pregnancy really isn't difficult for me. Like I can really like enjoy that with you. That helps that relationship. You recognizing.
That makes one of us.
Wait, what?
I said that makes one of us.
Wait, I don't know what you mean.
I don't find pregnancy enjoyable.
Oh, yeah. I understand. No, and that makes perfect sense.
Which we joked about.
But I mean, yes, of course. But I mean, like in the past, it's been really hard for me to be like with women who are pregnant. So yeah, but I can like, I can like be there. I shouldn't say enjoy.
No. I thought it was funny and I was like, oh, there's a good joke. Probably too, like poorly placed.
No, that's okay. But like,
that's my gift.
In the sense that like, like it's pretty universal. Biological children, generally people are like, oh, okay, that's really good. Congratulations. It's wonderful. How wonderful is that biological children? But over here, like this is one of my children, just like Bella is. And people have been so beautiful. But like when people understand like the gifts I'm giving to the world, this is one of them. Yep. And they're able to say like, oh, I can see the gift in that as well. Just like the child, like that's what helps to reduce that isolation. Like it helps to bring me in. Like I am, you view me as an integral part of the world and the church, just like somebody else. I'm not just like over here sobbing because I can't have a child, you know, not to say that that is an important part of grieving because it is, but you know, I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And that's part of like the negative side effect of the limiting, right? Is that biological children are tangible and they're visible. So it's easily quantifiable. I don't have to work for this. You got married, you made babies. Okay, boom, done. But that didn't happen with you. And yet you're still fruitful. You're still producing life. It's just not as easily quantifiable as a biological child, but it is no less valuable. And that's what I think your book is a challenge of, is to say like, hey, guess what? Just because it ain't obvious, don't mean it's not important, and doesn't mean that it's not needed. You know, like, broaden your imagination a little bit, people. Like, I always like to bring up, like, when you think about like the creative God that we have, I'm like, dude, have you ever seen a platypus? Like that is a wild creature. Okay. That is a wild creature. Like, it's a mammal, but it lays eggs, and it's like a beaver with a duck bill. I just want to know what was going on in heaven when God was like, I'm making one of these,
And have you seen a roach? I mean,
I know. It's like, but like a God who is that, and that's just my favorite example to use because it's silly, but if a God that is that creative, he can like his brain can come up with that. You telling me that he can't make a woman who cannot have a biological child fruitful?
Amen.
And
absolutely. I love that.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. Yeah.
I don't know what you're selling, but it ain't Christian. Go. Bye.
I love that. And I talk about that in my chapter on Victrice, is God's creativity, and how there are so many different ways. Like, we limit God when we don't allow his creativity to come through us, and however the heck he wants, however he wants. And that's whether you're fertile or infertile, honestly. So.
Yeah. And I think about the parable of the talents, right? Like, what happened to the dude who buried his talent? Didn't go very well. It did not go very well,
That's right.
That's the thing, is like, we are all given, whether you have biological children or not, like that's the thing that I love about your book, is that, things are going to have different priorities at different times in your life, obviously. But you're not absolved from using your gifts and talents because you have biological children. You don't get a pass. Like, your maternity, your gifts, your femininity, your fruitfulness, it's not like, well, I had kids, that's enough. No, you got other talents and you got other gifts. And you know what? There's going to be times where you can use them to their full extent. And there's going to be times where like family stuff comes up and you're like, you know what? Gotta take a back seat for a little while. Like, I did coaching for about a year, and then my kids' schedules changed. And it's like, you know what? I had to pump the brakes on it, but that gift is still there and it'll come back later. I haven't forgotten about it. I'm chomping at the bit to get back at it, but it's like, I have to, so I mean, like, yes, prioritize, balance, all that good stuff, but you don't get a pass.
And not to mention, it's not only not getting a pass, that brings you life. Like, you have found great enjoyment in that. So like, if life is feeling kind of stale, like, think about, what are the gifts that have been sitting on the shelf? Like, pursue those things. What are the deep desires on your heart? That makes you feel good too. It's not just you're being fruitful, but that in and of itself brings a lot of joy, which obviously
it brings that joy. Yeah. It brings that joy back into my family.
Yes.
It's not like I'm taking away. It's like, oh, mom is getting, she's getting juiced up on a coaching call, like, using her gifts. And now she's going to come down and she's going to be really like energized and happy, engaged with us. Right. Yeah. And I'm not using my kids to fill that. And I'm not like, anyway, but yeah, like, that's what I mean, is like, that's why I think your book is, obviously the target demo is infertile women. But if you're a fertile woman and you're like, well, I got kids, this book doesn't mean anything for me. It's like, yeah, it does. It's got some stuff in there for you. So.
Yeah. This is how we are designed. This is how God designed us. And it's awesome. And sometimes it's really hard. And we need to be real about that. But at the end of the day, there's hope. And there's like, let's look for that. Let's just kind of look for that. So,
speaking of, let's talk about your publishing process a little bit.
Oh, okay. You're gonna go there.
Speaking of,
Emily's
there
wanting
is
some
always
juice
hope.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will let you steer the conversation however you want, but that was a process.
Yeah.
That was a process, and it was a difficult one for a lot of reasons.
It was another part of dying to myself.
Yeah.
For sure. Because I mean, I think a lot of people see it this way, but just the traditional publishing route, we see that like there's one way to do things and it's the best way. And that was me. I just thought my book would only be credible if a Catholic publisher picked me up and published it for me and did that kind of thing. Like I wanted to say like published by whatever, whoever, insert Catholic publisher name. And that means this is credible. And that set me a year back, honestly. And it took me like, because it took me that long, I was trying to figure out how to write proposals and get those out and do it the right way, which I learned a lot, probably looked really silly to a lot of different people for a while. But I improved it a lot. And, I got some interest, specifically from one publisher and then another one, but ultimately it didn't go anywhere. And it was ironically before I even found out that my last hope, my favorite publisher I wanted to choose, before I found out like that wasn't going to go anywhere, is when I realized that Catholic publishing, like traditional Catholic publishing, is not going to be the best home for this book. Now, it's a good home, it's a good fit for a lot of authors and a lot of books. Okay. But for this book, which needed to be, again, this story needed to be told in a certain way, in a certain tone, in a certain voice, with certain details that cannot be left out. And just through what I've learned and talking through with a lot of people, I realized that Catholic publishers have to sell books the way like they are set up to, and they like to do things a certain way. And again, that serves some people, but I believe they would have wanted to make a lot of changes I wouldn't have been comfortable with. And ultimately, I need to have control over how this book is delivered. And that took a great death from me, like, dying to my desires. But ultimately, by the time I figured that learned that, got through that process, I'm just really pleased with where it brought me. I mean, look at this beautiful cover. I mean, so like the people that God connected me with to help me get the formatting and the editing and the cover design. It was hard. It's still hard. I'm still learning a lot, obviously, but
what I think is interesting is it's your story. And like you are absolutely, it needs to be told how you need it to be told, because that's the whole point. And you said it was like a death to self, and it's like, we're always told, it just the thing that popped in my head, we're always told like when you die to yourself, you find yourself. And I think that's what happened. Is like you had to die to your desire to get the Catholic publisher, but that actually helped you to be true to yourself.
Yeah. In
getting the publisher who is going to be like, yeah, you write whatever the heck you want.
That's right. It's individual. Like God's plans for our lives are individual. And wait, I didn't hear what you just said. What did you say?
Oh, is your self-publishing. So I said the publisher is yourself.
Oh, that's right. Yes. It's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's individual, and it's, it's not that far off to say similar things about infertility. It was just like, for me, this is how God designed, like, not to say he designed me to be infertile. That's not what I mean, but like what beautiful things have come from just like dying to my desires. And one of those things was there's so many different ways to do that throughout our lifetime. I mean, that's the point, is that like what I learned with this struggle with infertility absolutely applies, and I am still using. I'm like, okay, this is this hard lesson I learned. How can I use it? I really asked myself that question. Like, here's this challenge. Like, okay, well, what did God teach me through this really challenging thing I went through? I need to apply it here. Yeah. And so this is what you have in this book is kind of a recipe for that. Yeah. So.
And can we just point out the irony? Not that I'm bitter, that your whole struggle with infertility was from like the Catholic Church not seeing your goodness. And then you write a book about infertility, and Catholic publishers are like, hard pass.
Yeah, that is a reality. It was a sting, and you're absolutely right. I felt that. Like I was look, I know publishers got to publish, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, I was very like, there's not a lot of books on infertility
Yeah.
and all the other details that go with it, motherhood, fruitfulness, and then like, we talk about women's health and birth control and
Mhm.
IVF. These are very important topics that are
Yeah.
not discussed a lot in the Catholic Church. Well, they're not discussed
Yeah.
well.
No, they're not.
And
No.
I presented this as exactly what it is. And it's just like, I didn't hear back from more than half of them,
Yeah.
which they got to do business. I don't know how that works. And I know it's hard to get a
It's
book
a
published that way,
yeah.
but
It's a hard and uncomfortable story to share and to hear.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, I get that. But it's like those are the stories that need to be told. And it's like more people will find solidarity with that story than you'd
yeah,
think. And maybe the reason why there wasn't, maybe the reason why there isn't a market for it is because there hasn't been anything like it published before. So like it hasn't been
it's true.
purchased before, so it's
Yeah.
like somebody at some point is going to have to take a risk, and it's you.
Yeah, here we are.
You. Yep.
And here we are. So
Thank
we'll
you
see
for
what
taking the
happens. Oh,
risk.
well, thank you for your support and coming on this journey with me. It's been so exciting. I've been so, honestly, with the support, it's been so amazing, and it's really filled my heart, truly. So I'm so grateful for you and for all the other supporters out there. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
thank you. Anything else you want to add before I wrap this up?
Yeah, and to belabor a point, but to tie a bow on it, the more I've talked with you, like you've taught me so much more about like this like holistic understanding of motherhood, you know? Like this was just never really something that I even thought about, like I had these ideas, like I wanted to like do something, like I didn't want to just, like I wanted to stay at home, but I wanted to have like some kind of work that I did. Um, when I was 15, it was going to be a home-based interior design business. Things have obviously changed. I'm
You're
not
still
sad
good at
about
that, though.
it. Yeah, but I'm not sad about the changes. I'll do my own home, but whatever. People, I don't feel like dealing with clients. Anyway, not those types of clients. But it just I've always kind of wanted to do that, but I don't think I thought about it, or not. I don't think I know. I didn't think about it as this integrated thing. I didn't think about it as this is just part of who I am, and it's good, and it's a gift that I can put out into the world, and also a gift that I can invest in my family. Um, and to be really curious and explorative, is that a word?
That's a
About
word.
how somebody Google it won't be me. I'm not writing right now, I'm speaking, so I'm just making stuff up. That's what we did in architecture school. We made up words. So anyway,
Works.
yeah, it gave me a more integrated and holistic understanding of who I am as a person, which is like that's part of the gift. That's part of the gift that I can give the world, is that I don't see myself as a mother who also runs a nonprofit, who's also a wife. No, these are all integrated pieces, and they all feed off each other and feed each other, and these aren't disparate parts. And if I treat them as disparate parts, that's where it starts to fall apart. And so like, when you were talking about you kind of being curious about all of your gifts really kind of helped to spark that in me, of like,
I love that.
it wasn't things that I wasn't aware of. I just
Yeah.
didn't think about it as like an integrated whole. And so
Yes.
that's huge. That's huge, because that really does change the way that you live.
Yes.
So anyway.
Amen. Thank you for sharing. And that made me think of one of my favorite sentences that you wrote in the
Oh, we're quoting me
foreword.
now. Good.
Yes,
Okay.
I hope you're ready.
I'm quotable, boy.
Mary invites women into a process where they can explore their femininity, womanhood, and motherhood as the inerrant. Did I say that right? Inerrant? Okay, great.
Mhm.
Gift it is, regardless of whether they ever produce a biological child. She doesn't do this with theological platitudes, but from her own heart. She illuminates the truth of the Catholic female identity and its fullness because she has labored to discover it.
I picked that word labor on purpose.
Yes, I figured that you did. I picked the word delivered in my subtitle on purpose.
Nice.
I did. Well, back behind the scenes. That's what I'm trying to think of, info.
Yes.
But yeah, I love, I have labored to discover this side of things, which allows me like to communicate it in this way. And like, just as you have described, this fullness of womanhood and motherhood. It's just one full thing.
Yeah.
Let's treat it like that.
Yeah.
Let's be full. Yeah. Let's be full together.
Yeah. We're not separating. I mean, we're good at doing that in this world of like, thinking of our, our lives as like, well, I go here and I do that, I go to work and I do this, and then I come home and I do this and da-da-da. It's like, yeah, we've really separated it. I forget who shared this. Sorry, now I'm going on a tangent, but this will be quick. But just, kind of going back to this idea of production and defining ourselves by what we do. I had somebody explain before that this is actually like a very Western idea, that we define ourselves by what we do, that actually like in Eastern cultures, you define yourself by who you are, and one of the examples given was from scripture, Joseph, who, was sold into slavery by his brothers and goes to Egypt and eventually basically becomes de facto Pharaoh. Like he's given the level of responsibility and authority that basically makes him the Pharaoh. No, so if you define Joseph by what he did, he was the Pharaoh. But nobody in that country saw him as the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was still the Pharaoh because that's who he was. And I just think that part of the reason why we have such a hard time, separating, here I'm saying not to separate, and I'm like, okay, now we got to separate. But seeing the goodness of the person based on who they are, not on what they produce, right? Whether it's work related or biologically related or anything, it's like, it's not about what I do. It's not about what I produce. It's about who I am. Mm-hmm. And that's I just kind of sound, and I think that's relevant to this because, I'm not going to put a nice conclusion here. I'm just going to throw that out there and be like, all right, you guys think about it. Because it's, how do we define ourselves? Yeah. Is it by what, and it's easy to define ourselves by what we produce because it's tangible, it's quantifiable, but it's not who we are. And we know that what matters is who we are.
Yeah, I think you said that beautifully. It's just an opportunity to check ourselves. Of all, we check ourselves every once in a while. Who am I? How am I defining myself? How does God define me? And that's what's most important. And it's rooting through a lot of lies to get to how God defines me, because we get that so jumbled up in our heads. Mm-hmm. And so, excuse me. So yeah, who am I? But most importantly, like, how does God define me? Because nothing, no circumstance can change that. And that's really comforting. At the end of the day, that is a comforting fact that nothing can affect that.
Right.
Nothing. So
nothing. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much, Emily.
Yeah, we had
chat with me.
I knew it was going to be a fun conversation. Yep.
This was really fun. So, and thank you to all of our listeners for staying tuned to our surprise podcast episode, a little bonus episode for you. We hope you've enjoyed it. Stick around because we will be back with more brand new and very juicy episodes. So follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and you can subscribe to our email list as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get all of these videos firsthand. And we will eventually sprinkle out some other videos besides podcasts too. If you are interested in purchasing my first book, my new book, 12 Stripes Deep, How Infertility and Other Suffering Delivered My Greatest Joys. It is available on July 12th, 2022 and afterwards. You can find it on Amazon and other places. So just look for the link on our website and on our social media platforms and in the email. And until next time, we wish you all the best. Thank you so much for being here. Y'all take care.